That really created our central challenge. How do we bridge that significant financial gap while still honoring our deep commitments to our students, our staff, and the entire Bedford community? This table really lays out the whole story. You can see we started with that $56.1 million figure, which is that necessary but unsustainable 7.7% increase. Through a multi-part plan, we've been able to reduce that down to a much more responsible proposed increase of 3.08% or $1.6 million. So how did we get there? Well, we developed a three-part strategy. It's focused on responsible reductions, finding new sources of revenue, and using a key financial safeguard we already have in place. Let's start with the first part of our plan, which is making responsible reductions. We began by looking for efficiencies that would have the least possible impact on the day-to-day experience for our students. We approached these reductions in two distinct tiers. Tier 1 is all about capitalizing on natural staff turnover, retirements and resignations. That allows us to reduce 12.5 positions without any layoffs. Now, Tier 2 involves a potential further reduction of 6.6 positions, which, we have to be honest, could involve layoffs if other voluntary departures don't happen. Okay, so the second part of our plan required us to look beyond just making cuts. We had to find new ways to generate revenue to help offset some of these rising costs. And our guiding principle here was absolutely clear. Any new revenue source could not, under any circumstances, prevent a student from fully participating in school life because of financial hardship. That was non-negotiable. So with that principle in mind, we're proposing a few new fees. These are for secondary school activities, student parking at the high school, and an optional device protection plan. These changes would actually just align our practices with what many of our surrounding districts are already doing. And this is the most important commitment we can make about these fees. For every single one, there will be a simple and confidential waiver process in place. Let us be perfectly clear. Financial need will never be a barrier to participation for any student in our schools. All right, the final piece of our strategy. This involves using an existing and really vital financial tool. This is what allows us to protect our schools from those unpredictable costs that are often completely outside of our control. That tool is the Special Education Stabilization Fund. Think of it as a critical safeguard. It's a reserve fund, and it's specifically designed to cover unexpected mandated special education costs so we don't have to make sudden emergency cuts to other essential programs. By using this fund responsibly, and only as a last resort, it allows us to absorb those really volatile, non-discretionary costs. This way, we can thoughtfully adapt our budget over time, rather than just reacting to a crisis. So, after putting this whole three-part strategy into place, the responsible reductions, the new revenue, and using our financial safeguard, we arrived at our final responsible budget request, a 3.08% increase over last year. We truly believe this is a thoughtful budget. It's one that balances our core mission of providing an excellent education with the very real financial pressures that we and our entire community are facing together. We really want to thank you for your time and for your engagement. This is a crucial conversation for all of us, and by working together, we can continue to answer this important question and ensure a strong, sustainable future for our schools.
All right, let me share. Whoops, not that. Brief presentation that gives a little bit more detail to what you just heard in the video. on. That's weird. Okay, there we go. All right, so as the video briefly described, this is the final proposal for your consideration tonight for the fiscal 27 school budget, which is designed to continue our progress towards boosting, promoting, and strengthening our school system aligned with our strategic plan. So top level, the final bottom line budget that we're proposing be approved is $53,697,409, which is a $1.6 million increase over fiscal 26, and that bottom line 3.08% increase. The context, remember, is that we are in a declining enrollment situation that is accelerating and continuing through to our secondary schools. We're expecting additional decline to occur over the next decade, but it has already taken hold through the elementary schools and into the secondary schools. So we are proposing to right size and ensure that our resources are aligned to the number of students that the community is serving. As described in the video, the maintenance of effort budget is just over $4 million if we were to leave all services level and make no changes to our staffing structure or programs, and this includes the cost escalation that we've talked about in prior meetings, driven largely by the lion's share of our budget being salaries and the historic investment we've made to attract and retain our excellent workforce. And as we've talked about quite a bit, special education costs, particularly transportation, are escalating and continuing to escalate at much higher rates than inflation and cost of living adjustments. Just a reminder, we've broken down the changes into 3 tiers. Tier 1, which we are strongly recommending and which can be achieved without layoffs. Tier 2, which we believe must be considered but will require potential layoffs depending on if we can, depending on what happens in the next couple months. And then the revenue tier that was discussed, which includes the fees as well as strategic use of the stabilization fund. One of the key things that has shifted actually between the last discussion that we had 2 weeks ago is that we have been able to move additional positions from Tier 2 to Tier 1. So we're up to a net of 11 and a half of those positions in Tier 1, which means we believe we can reduce those positions through either not filling vacancies or reallocations without any layoffs. I do want to emphasize, though, that it does mean that staff may be doing something different than they were doing this year, but they will not lose their positions. And as we had talked about at the beginning, nothing has changed with respect to the small adds, which are around cost avoidance related to a required special education programming. This is all extra detail. Tier 2 is down to 6 positions that are proposed to be reduced that will, at least at this point, may result in layoffs, involuntary layoffs. We're hoping that over the next 2 months that we continue to pick up some voluntary attrition and departure so we can mitigate this. But as of this point, we believe these are reductions that must be considered in order to be responsible in line with the declining enrollment. And again, the priority investments, the very targeted ones, are aligned to the strategic plan and will mitigate 0.6 of that 6.6 reductions here, so a net reduction of 6.0 FTE in Tier 2. A reminder that in both tiers we will remain in alignment with our newly documented class size and caseload guidelines. I have been transparent to say that there may be some upward pressure on the guidelines, particularly at the secondary level, but based on our analysis of enrollment and student course choices, we will still remain within those guidelines and will not need to adjust those guidelines. We are pushing towards the edge, however, and additional reductions might require us to actually adjust those guidelines. So we're trying to avoid that if at all possible. Last, the revenue tier consists of those 3 different revenues, fee sources. We have landed on the same amount that we discussed last week on just secondary fees, as well as the all-access concept at 2 levels, the basic level for the non-resource intensive middle school and high school clubs and activities, and the all-access level at the $400 level, where once a student accesses one of those activities, they can access all activities for the one all-access fee. We adjusted the participation rates to align with the data that we have on historical participation for activities as well as for student parking, and there have been no changes to the voluntary device protection fee estimates. And then lastly, and we'll talk a little bit more about this, the targeted reliance on the stabilization fund to mitigate additional reductions that could be destabilizing and reduce student programming. So there's one change that is outlined in your full budget book, a slight change, which is the additional request was originally $350,000 to bring us up to the full $1 million that is allowed by law based on our current net school spending. However, in reviewing this stabilization fund policy that the select board and school committee approved back in 2024 when it was established, we actually hard-coded the maximum amount at the then maximum of $950,000. So I will be bringing back to both the school committee and the select board a proposed amendment to that policy to actually set it in alignment with the statutory language so that it will adjust with inflation. So we are legally, by law, allowed to put more than $1 million into it, but our current policies only allows $950,000. So we have adjusted our request for the town of transfer of one-time funds into the stabilization fund from $350,000 to $300,000, and then that will give us the buffer for the planned reliance of $491,000 that is embedded in this request. Although I have some more information about that as well. Actually, it's not on this presentation, but I did want to share that in the intervening time since we finalized this detail, we had a number of pieces of optimistic good news, which should allow us hopefully to reduce the reliance on that stabilization fund. And if everything breaks our way, we might not, based on what we currently know with respect to special education costs, need to rely on it hopefully at all. As we have articulated since we established the fund, we haven't actually touched the fund yet, with much help from the town, to be clear. But this year, which we will report on in the second half of this meeting, we are still under the $350,000 that we had budgeted and were approved to rely on this year, because we are continuing to try to consider that a last resort. So some pieces of good news. There is bipartisan agreement in Congress at this point to reject the proposed cuts to Titles 2, 3, and 4, which we had not budgeted for because the current federal administration had actually attempted to cut it this year, and then it was reversed. But we anticipated that they would remove it from the FY27 federal budget, but Congress is on its way to approving a bipartisan level of funding that keeps those level funded and actually increases Title I slightly. So we didn't embed any increase in Title I, and we didn't count on any of the Title II, 3, or 4, which amounts to about $45,000. In addition, we just got word last Friday that the governor is proposing to fund Circuit Breaker fully, including the transportation reimbursement, which you might recall from last year was a big shortfall. We thought they were fully funding it this year, but they didn't. But we sort of landed right, I think, at the sweet spot this year. But we've continued to under budget because the state has not come through with its commitment to fully fund that. If it's coming through in the budget governor's proposal, which is expected to be released tomorrow, that is another $125,000 or so that we did not budget for yet because we haven't ever seen it come through. Lastly, actually second to last, I think there's one more thing. I am in deep conversations right now with state officials around some additional reimbursements for Bedford in relation to special education out-of-district tuition costs, which could yield in the order of $300,000 or so. This again is still in process. I don't expect to have more specific detail until March, but I do have the support of our local legislative leaders, and have been in touch directly with the Executive Office of Education, who's in touch with the Governor's Office. So we are working on trying to ensure that we maximize the amount of state support that we get for out-of-district special education costs. I think there was one more thing, Julie. What was the other thing? Finally, as you may know, we are members of two special education collaboratives, the CASE Collaborative and the Lab Collaborative, both of which are in extremely strong financial position. I sit on both boards on behalf of the district, and this year I think between the two of them are getting about $60,000 of member tuition credits back. We do not budget for those, so that is also not embedded or included in our budget assumptions for next year. But given the historical track record and the current financial position of these collaboratives, we're cautiously optimistic that we will get additional tuition member credits for next year as well. So we are trying to be conservative and realistic, but we've gotten a lot of recent positive news, none of which have fully landed because Congress has to vote and President Trump has to sign into law. The governor the budget has to go through the process, and the tuition credits are still, dependent on next year. But we have a lot of potential avenues to eliminate the need for this reliance on the stabilization fund to some or the whole extent. But we're still wanting to be conservative in terms of signaling transparently that we may need to rely on that. And again, as you may know, and you will hear in Q2, and as Marianne can also speak to if you want more details, we, every day, ups and downs in the hundreds of thousands, depending on situations with individual students that we are responsible for, and we navigate carefully. So the fund is a crucial tool in ensuring that we are able to buffer against having to make sudden reductions for non-discretionary costs. So that is the high-level overview. The full document has been posted since Friday. It is currently online. As you know, tonight is the public hearing that we're just about to have, and we're asking for your vote tonight so that I can take this over back into this room, actually, in 2 days, 48 hours from now, to present this budget, presuming that there are no changes, to the Finance Committee for their first, I don't know if it's a first read, but their first discussion, and then that will continue into into February, where I believe then we present, or the Finance Committee presents to the Select Board at some point, leading up to the March 25th, 4th, 7th, I forget which day, town meeting when the town will vote on this budget. So that's it. So I think this is first for the public.
Sure.
And
all right, then we will. Sure, thank you. I already read the statement on public comment. Brad is ready to time. So that being said, we will start in the room if anyone wishes to give public comment. As a reminder, you'll have 3 minutes to provide your name, your address, and then 3 minutes being timed by Brad. So is there anyone in the room wishing to speak on the issue of the budget? Come on up.
Good evening. My name is Nathan Cooprider, 608 Springs Road. I wanted to ask a couple follow-up questions, or at least mention some things I'd like more clarification on regarding that question that the video ended with, which is, what does a sustainable future look like for Bedford schools? We've heard a lot about what the budget reduction is not doing. We're trying really hard to not do any involuntary layoffs, and there's a lot of other things. What I'm trying to find out is what is being reduced in terms of services by this budget. I understand, like, as we're going through and trying to get this approved, we live in a place where we have to get a majority, and that's going to involve targeting the center of the normal distribution. And that's going to be pulling in those funds towards that area. That makes me worried for those who are in the minority and the disenfranchised, those at the edges, both at the bottom and the top. While we minimize the reduction in services, the math doesn't work. You can't subtract something and still have the same number of services. Something is going to be lost. For example, we lauded those who are doing voluntary reduction in force, and justifiably, but we're also losing the institutional knowledge and experience of those senior individuals, and without necessarily the kind of transfer and runway that we would like for some kind of transition. So, maybe our community, maybe Bedford can't afford maintaining that institutional knowledge or maintaining these services. Or maybe we won't. Maybe we're just choosing not to. But I'd like to know what exactly we're losing with this budget. I never have liked the slogan of "No Child Left Behind." It gives me an image of some child being dragged beyond this cart as it's being pulled along, or a child being shackled as it tries to run ahead forward. I prefer a little bit more of the idea of a path for every child. And my fear is that we're losing paths with this budget, and that might be required. But my question is, I don't know which paths we're losing, and it's not clear to me, and I would like more information about that. Thanks.
Thank you. Cliff, would you like to address this
Sure.
question?
So,
Should I time Cliff for 3 minutes also?
as proposed, there will be no service reductions with respect to the types of services we offer. So, for example, in some of the conversations that are happening in other towns, they may no longer offer middle school sports, or they may no longer offer French as a language option, or they may no longer offer this course or that course. As we've currently planned it, none of those things will occur here in Bedford. We do have some inefficiencies with respect to our class sizes against our guidelines. Just as an example, about 5 or 6 years ago, our entry in kindergarten class was closer to 200 students. Right now, our kindergarten class is around 130 students. So back 10 years ago, we had 10 teachers for 20 kids per classroom, and now we only need 7 teachers for less than 20 kids per classroom. So no services are lost with respect to kindergartners because there are less kindergartners. In the same way, as you go up the grade span, it gets a little more complicated, but we have class sizes that are well below our stated guidelines, and so you can potentially reduce staff and not have to, if a staff member decides to retire. And I want to be clear, all of the tier 1 departures are completely voluntary and part of a natural, people were going to retire or move, and we assess whether or not we need to backfill that position. If you have less kids taking a course, you don't need the same number of staff sections in order to cover those courses. So as we've said before, it is possible that class sizes may push upward a bit. So instead of a class of 19, it might be 22. And the other pressure point might be that we might not be able to offer as many sections of electives that the upperclassmen might choose. So instead of 4 sections of a course, it might be 3 sections of a course. So some number of students, maybe more than in prior years, might get their second choice of elective. But as of this point, we are not reducing any of the types of courses, AP or electives that we offer. We have done a very good job in Bedford, at Bedford High in particular, of adapting our schedule to what students want through the annual process, and our commitment to that remains the same. So, I am saying publicly that we are not reducing any specific type of service. What might be noticeable, particularly at the secondary level, is that there may be slightly larger classes than people are used to. But in some cases, I don't think people are going to notice those. The students won't notice. I do not want to minimize the fact that staff will notice, because some staff will be teaching classes or supporting classes that they didn't last year. And in tier 2, unless we get some more voluntary departures, there may be some layoffs that are required.
Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else in the room wishing to speak on the budget? No? All right, seeing none, if you're attending this virtually and you wish to be heard on the budget, if you wouldn't mind raising your virtual hand.
Holly.
All right, it looks like we have one. Holly, go on ahead.
Hi everyone, this is Holly Muncie, 3 Lexington Circle. I understand completely that we need to make cuts, and it looks like we've done a really thorough job of finding places to make cuts. The place where I just wanted to kind of ask a question, and I have some concern, I mean, it's kind of along the same lines as the last speaker, like what are we losing? So I understand the need to be vague and that, decisions haven't been made on exactly what we're cutting. But I've been looking through the numbers and I see that the high school is the one area where we're actually growing in population next year. I think we're growing by 20 students. And I see that we might be cutting electives, and students might, they're not cutting actual electives, but cutting sections of electives. And for upperclassmen, AP classes are their electives. And so I guess I'm just concerned that we're going to be cutting sections of AP classes, so instead of there being 3 AP bio classes, maybe there's only 2. And, these AP electives are so important to the students, and so I know it said in there that you try to prioritize APs. I guess I'm still just concerned that we're going to be losing, not as many kids are going to be able to get into the first choice AP classes that they want. That's my concern. So I'm just hoping that maybe we can really pay attention to that and when we make decisions about what they're cutting.
Yeah, so we are going to preserve access to AP classes to the maximum extent possible. In particular, any courses that are part of a student's trajectory into higher education or post-secondary will be prioritized. I don't know, I can't speak to the specifics, but there are times when a kid may not get every single course, including an AP, because we're maxed out and we can't run another section for 2 kids. However, I do believe the high school team does a very, very good job of trying to accommodate, and our teachers are usually pretty flexible. If there are, say, right now our sort of standard or our upper maximum for any class of any size is 25. But we do have a couple of courses that are 26 or 27, and our teachers are usually pretty accommodating if they know that a student really needs that course to continue on whatever trajectory they decided. And we will continue that. I think the example that I can give without getting into too much detail is that for English, for example, the AP courses are typically taken in junior year. Senior year is an unleveled elective, and we offer a whole range of exciting electives. That's the type of course where a student might get their second choice. They do need the 4th credit for higher education, and they will get a 4th credit. It just we may not be able to run a second section of a popular course that only has 6 students, which we are doing right now. So that's the type of thing where those 6 students might get their second choice. Instead of running a first choice course that's full with a second course that has 6 kids and having another different course that only has 12 kids, we might not run all of those courses, and the 6 might have to take the course that had 12 kids in it or another course that had space, if that makes sense. So when you optimize that across all of the departments, you can pick up savings in a way that minimizes the impact on student choice. But we've made an explicit commitment around preserving AP and what I would call trajectory courses in terms of not denying a student what they're planning for. And that's taken into account in terms of prioritization. If a student has a clear pathway, right, we're going to make sure to do our best to accommodate it.
Great, thank you. Holly, did that answer your question?
Okay, yeah, thank you.
Great. Is there anyone else? If there's anyone else online who wishes to speak, now is the right time. anything? All right, seeing none, we'll close the public comment portion of this hearing. We will go around for our first round of discussion, starting with you, Kim.
Yeah, no questions, thank you.
Okay. Angel.
My only question is just, do you have any anticipated concern about the funding being $50,000 left for the stabilization fund?
Sorry, say that again?
So do you have any, like, what would the ramifications, maybe is a better way to say that, of instead of funding it the full 350 or 300, like, were you relying on that full 350 somewhere?
Yeah, so right now there's 650,000 in the fund. Our current budget has approved us to go up to 350 of that 600. As you'll hear about in probably in 20 minutes, we're at 216, 220 of the 350 that we think we might need, although we're halfway through the year and we still have time to close the gap like we did last year. We're hoping to pick up some ground.
Right.
If we get no additional money from the town, right, and we draw down 200, let's just say 250 for sake of argument, that drops us to 400,000 left in the stabilization fund. Our proposed budget relies on up to 491,000, so we would be very tight, right? So we are asking for the fill up,
I see.
with the hope that we don't need as much this year and that we don't need as much next year, and that we will have a nice healthy chunk. I've reminded the community often about this, but in fiscal 24, my first year as superintendent, the swing in terms of eligible costs for special education unforeseen was 2.2 million. So the maximum stabilization fund still wouldn't have withstood the level of swing, although you may recall that we were able to get $1 million of extraordinary relief because the state recognizes that if you have such big of a swing, they come in and give you real-time current year. But it still makes us all feel better, sleep better at night to have that stabilization fund, because absent that stabilization fund, we would have to make mid-year reductions, which is, as you may have heard in other communities, not good. So we would like to have a healthy balance in that stabilization fund. But we're only asking for 300,000 because we haven't touched it yet, and that's the maximum that we can get to until I get the select board and you all to amend the upper end.
That was my only question. Thank you.
Sarah.
Thank you. I'm going to put a plug in for pushing town meeting back again, because every time we come, the 3.08, it's getting reduced down and down, which means is we're getting more and more information from the current year that we can put to good use for next year's budget. And if we had a little bit longer time, we would have another month or so, right? We wouldn't be here tonight approving this. We would do it if town meeting gets pushed back. And then it wouldn't go down as much, but I think it would be very helpful, is what I'm saying.
Yeah, and I would say I don't know if the amount at this point could go down that much more without starting to impact the concerns that I think Mr. Cooper-Ryder brought up. But as you see, we could continue to move tier 2 into tier 1, right? And that actually, I think, helps. But because we're still early on in the process, we have to be transparent that, again, things are moving, but our best guess based on what we know is that 6 of those positions still might need to be layoffs. I want to be transparent that I think even with the additional 2 months, I would be very surprised if we could get away with no layoffs whatsoever. Things would have to fall in a pretty magical way, because the retirements and the departures don't necessarily come in the right places, right?
Yeah.
But to the extent that we can, we're trying to take advantage of that. And I want to be realistic that even though there may be a job for someone, people don't necessarily, people are not widgets, so it's understandable that someone may not want to take the job that is available, and that would result in it would still be a voluntary departure, but maybe more under duress, and that is the unfortunate reality of the declining enrollment scenario. But I agree, if we had more time we would be able to refine those numbers in a way that is a little more precise.
I just want to, it's been talked about, and I want to reiterate the puzzle of scheduling, and we could say that to the middle school too. I think the schedule will probably be looked at pretty significantly over the next, maybe not next year, but the next couple of years with the enrollment decline. That in the high school, it's just a big balance puzzle, and it's, I think it's, the ability is there to do it. I want to be somebody like me as a mom will call right up or email. I just want to be careful for families who don't have that advocacy, or that there are potential of falling through the cracks. But I believe that the high school can make that puzzle work for families. However way, if they need to be in that AP class or need to have that, they'll make it work. Or even if they need to have the art class or the music class to graduate, how to fit that all together. But I think, thank you for the latest succinct. I like the video. The video is good.
Yeah, to that last point, I do want to say that we are doing our very best to dovetail the student selection, course selection process of the high school with the final decisions about staff transitions. And I think it's going to be very tight, but we're hoping to have the information about what students want and what courses they want before we decide sort of how to do the reallocations. I've already worked with the union leadership around truncating some of the timelines, around posting internal positions in order to maximize the possibility of voluntary movement. So I will actually be sending out a message to staff tomorrow with more internal detail about when we will announce sort of notifications and also opportunities in a staged sequence in the month of March, immediately following town meeting. And that's right around the time that the course selection data comes in. So we're still in the final stages of trying to make sure we have that information so that we don't prematurely lose capacity in a subject area where there's higher student demand. So it's going to be an intense couple of weeks at that time, but we're committed to doing our very best to try to honor student requests while staying within our fiscal constraints.
Awesome. I'm all set. Thanks.
Thanks. Sheila?
Sure. Couple of comments. So first, Cliff, I just want to acknowledge in your presentation after the video, just your continued focus in working with our local legislative representatives, folks at the state. You and the team are continually looking to figure out how can we leverage additional funds outside of the district to not only benefit the district and bring additional services, but especially in this time with budget crunch. So that, I just want to publicly acknowledge that, because since you've come on board, there's always been that advocacy, which I think part and part came from your previous position at DESE, and understanding who you can talk to, where can we tap in funds. So I just wanted to acknowledge that. Thank you. Another point on the stabilization fund, something else you said that word is from the governor's office that they intend to fully fund the circuit breaker. However, things change, which just underscores the importance of the stabilization fund. Because if we take that at face value, we thought that they were going to fully fund it last year and they didn't. And had we not had the stabilization fund, we would have been in a situation to come back to select board or to the town to ask for those additional funds. So the reason why that fund exists is exactly for this reason. We are taking the governor's word at sort of face value, but things can change and we need to be able to plan for that and pay our bills. So that's just a reminder to the community of the importance of that. I think the one thing I just wanted you to highlight and just remind people again is we get some credit back, and it's escaping me now. Maybe it's from the state fund or anything else, but there's money that we get back that the school budget doesn't get credit for. The town gets credit for it. And I don't think we're asking for that right now as a direct transfer, but it's important in the context of this, as the narrative is we're going in over guidelines. When we start to add these things back in, it's important that the public understands what that figure was or what it could be, and how, if that was added into our bucket, how that would bring the ask down. Could you just remind people
Yeah.
what I'm talking about?
Yeah, we'll touch on this again in the quarter two report, but for example, as you may recall, we are currently still carrying, not as a result of the homeless shelter crisis, but just because of, I think, individual situations. I think it's $57,000 or $60,000 of unexpected additional McKinney-Vento transportation costs. The reimbursement of, I think, $67,000 or $80,000 from last year's batch came to the town, right? And you know, we get the whole operating budget from the town, so it's not a tit for tat, but you're correct that the reimbursement on the extraordinary costs that we're incurring now doesn't come directly to the schools. The other types of funds that we do the work to obtain, I think Marianne's team does the Medicaid reimbursement costs, which help to offset some of our special ed health related costs, but that comes in on the town side. The federal impact military mitigation aid comes in on the town side. Chapter 70 comes in on the town side. I think the earmark that I worked on with Representative Gordon and Town Manager Hanson related to Shawshing tuition is coming in on the town side, although the costs are coming out on the town side on that one. So there are definitely, I think, vocational transportation we pay for on the school side, though the tuition comes out on the town side, and reimbursements, I think, come in on the town side for vocational regional transportation, or do we not get any?
Depends on the timing.
Yeah, so there's a whole ecosystem of that. I think the other thing I would highlight that I didn't highlight this week, but we talked about previously, is given the number of position reductions that are net 17 and a half positions in this budget, there's a commensurate reduction in town side benefit carrying costs, and I think that's roughly could be 200 to 400 grand depending on whether people are on family plans. So we're not showing that savings on the school side, but it will actually show up in the bottom line on the town side, although the town budgets for those in that fixed cost bucket. So I think it unfortunately will just get swallowed up by that's increasing, I think, at rates higher than we expected, so this just might help them come in right on budget. But there is a lot of interaction between town and school side because it is a partnership.
Yeah, absolutely. And it might just be good for the presentation to go to FinCom to just have those figures if that comes up, right? Because that does factor into everything, right? It's not this is mine, this is yours. But when there are questions about the costs and where they're coming from, and if we're looking at what we're asking for versus being reimbursed for, that is an important figure that every town member should understand. So there's no confusion.
Yeah.
And lastly, I just want to thank you and Julie and the entire team of people that have worked on this. This is not easy. As we took a look at what it would have been had we made no cuts, we are doing some different things this year in terms of generating some revenue, making some decisions. None of that is easy. We're absolutely trying to preserve the benefits of our school system, stabilize it, support our educators, support our students, support our community, be good community members, be fiscally responsible, and still create an excellent environment within our school system. So thank you for all of your work, and to Julie and everyone else that's worked on this.
Thank you.
Thank you. Brad?
I'd like to echo all of the thanks that Sheila just very eloquently stated, so thank you to everybody. My only question was, Cliff, you talked about some, I heard you say some things about optimistic good news, things that are happening and so on. Is any of that hitting the current year budget, or was all of that for next year? It was a little unclear to me what the timing was.
Is all the Title II to IV is prospective for next year because they restored it for this year, and we are obviously counting on it this year. The circuit breaker transportation is for next year. I don't know, Julie.
Collaborative credits are coming into the Q2 report.
Yeah, so before I get to collaborative, just on the circuit breaker transportation, had it been funded this year fully, we might not need to rely on the stabilization fund. I'm not sure what the delta is on that.
But they're not going to retroactively do that. Right?
Well,
so
they're not, except part of what happened last year, if you recall, just a reminder to the community, we were at one point potentially looking at $1.5 million from the town to address the carryover impacts of the fiscal '24 special ed, but when all was said and done, we only asked for 475,000, and that's because the state came through with a supplemental on the transportation bit at the last minute. I do think there is advocacy for this year in the supplemental for fiscal '26 for the same thing, so there is a possibility that at the last minute, it could wipe clean our need to touch the stabilization fund, so not maybe entirely clean, but that advocacy continues, but I think the superintendent and school committee associations have been successful in convincing the governor and the state legislature that you've got to fully fund this extraordinary piece because it affects everyone. So it's a good sign that the governor is coming out with a budget that is committed to the full funding. But we're gonna try to, depending on what comes through on the revenue side on fair share, that is where we got some of the money through the supplemental last year. So we're not giving up efforts on this year, but we're focusing on trying to make sure next year doesn't have the same starting gap.
Okay, and just so,
And the collaborative tuitions, we've already gotten those for this year, and they are embedded in the quarter two report that you're about to hear from Julie. We're not counting on them for next year to be conservative, but I'm highly optimistic. I actually advocated at both board meetings when we made this decision for it to come back through member credits instead of additional investments at the collaboratives.
so just to summarize, so I make sure I'm clear about this, all of those are sort of uncertainties at this point.
Yeah.
None of those favorable assumptions are baked into the budget.
Right.
So if any portion of that comes to fruition favorably will just mean a reduction in what we need to ask for from special education fund next year,
Yeah.
basically. Okay, that's where it is.
Yeah.
Okay, great. Okay, that's my only question. Thank you.
If everything breaks our way, we might actually be able to reduce the operating budget draw, not use the stabilization fund, and I think the whole package is like 600 or 700 grand when you put all the pieces together, if everything breaks our way, but that's a big issue.
Okay, thanks. Thank you, Cliff. I echo what everyone else said. I have been on a few calls for what you're talking about with local state government leaders. They've all been very complimentary of your work and your advocacy. So a public thank you for your efforts. We'll see and hope that they hit, but everyone I have spoken to in my role has said that you've done a really terrific job of trying to make this happen. So thank you for that. I do have a few questions, and they're questions that have been raised by community members to me that I'm now asking of you. The first one being the use of the Special Ed Stabilization Fund. I know we've talked about this a little bit, the $491,755. How did we end up at that amount? Like, what is that amount for?
Yeah. So if people are interested in the gory detail, it is in the full budget book, which is posted online, and I believe it is for reference, page 27. But what we did was a calculation of what amount of special ed costs that are eligible for the stabilization fund are above the 2.5% growth guideline that was set by the Finance Committee. And as we've talked about at some length, these are non-discretionary costs that we don't have any ability to not pay. We can't negotiate them. I, as superintendent, can't overrule Marianne as the director of special ed for the district. It goes through a separate state appeal process, and the rates are set by the state, by OSD. So we calculated the amount of increase above 2.5%. That if this were a town side non-discretionary expense like health insurance would be put in that fixed cost bucket. So that $491,000 is the precise estimate of the amount of money above 2.5. So we're saying that we think it's fair game for us to absorb a standard escalation of these costs. But the extraordinary escalation, which is 37.8% for transportation and 4.1, it's actually out of district where, it breaks both ways, but our projections for next year, it's not super over-pressurized, but the transportation is. So that is the amount that is over 2.5 escalation.
Thank you. Another question, and I don't believe it's come up in our discussion of fees, is just a little more clarity about how these fees affect clubs and activities at the high school that already have their own fees.
Yep.
and a question that was raised to me, I know we've talked about this in how it applies to elementary school and rec fees, but there are some clubs and activities, DECA, Model UN, like those types of activities, which have fees that families pay.
Yep.
Do these fees erase those fees, or are these
Right.
fees on top of those fees?
Right. So the short answer is these are on top of those fees. So, contrary to popular belief, we are not actually a fee district. We don't have the same level of fee structures, but we've always had some of these fees. And the example I always point to is that in middle school, most families pay more than $2,000 of fees in order to have their children participate in Nature's Classroom in 6th grade and the DC trip in 8th grade. And we as a community have successfully met the need for families and students who can't pay. That has always been a commitment, and we have succeeded as a community to do that. So I'm very confident we'll continue to do that at the, with this new fee structure. That said, there are some clubs, I think, that kids pay for uniforms, some participation fees. The current process is such that in order to have a field trip or some type of thing approved, there has to be a demonstration of a scholarship's availability, and again, that has been universally taken on by the club leaders and the school leaders. So this $150 or $400 fee would be in addition to those fees, because we are looking at we weren't looking to, we're trying to offset the cost escalation in the operating budget to run these clubs. The fees that students are typically and families are typically paying right now are for material or goods related to that activity. What we're attempting to cover is the cost of the personnel to run these clubs and activities. And this is, just to be clear, an offset, a small offset. We're still investing quite a significant portion of our operating budget to run the clubs. So we don't expect that those fee structures will change as a result of this fee structure.
Okay, thank you for the clarification. I think just an awareness of transparency and awareness of what this could mean for our family, and to remind people that we do have these fee waivers available, and it's a confidential process. That said, thank you to the community members who provided questions. I shared your questions, and I thank you for answering those in a way that I think is affirmative. Just one last note, I suppose, for myself is just a reminder that a thank you to my colleagues in the school committee. I think we've really taken this duty of fiscal stewardship very seriously throughout this process. We've discussed this, we've pushed back, we've managed to come up with a number that reduces the burden on the town and allows us to offer schools that we're proud of. So I think that,
Maybe we're closing the door.
we're having trouble hearing
Thank
in the
you.
back with the door. But anyways, a thank you to my colleagues and to Julie and Cliff in particular, just for allowing us to continue to offer services in schools that make us proud while trying to make this the lowest possible burden on the town while doing so. So thank you for going through this process. Is there anything else you would like to add?
No, so to close, there are two recommended motions. The first one being the bottom line approval of the bottom line budget, and permission, authorization for me to adapt the materials to present to the Finance Committee, although literally I think we already did it. We just changed the label on the front page to school committee approved budget instead of the proposed budget. And I will actually plan to transmit it, Mark, and is there anyone, Alan and Tom, tonight. Aaron might actually transmit it while we're in the second half of the meeting, but you can have this hard copy right now if you would like. And then the second motion is the motion to approve the request to take to the town of the $300,000 down from $350 transfer into the stabilization fund. And then immediately after you take those votes, we are going to ask for an administrative vote on the establishment of the revolving account to collect the activity fees. It's similar to the vote you took last year when we established a small revolving account for our performing arts team, so that they didn't have to pay out of pocket for materials, and they could charge it directly to the district account. So, so those are the three motions. There's a separate memo on that revolving fund fee, revolving fund account but you can take all three in succession if you want, because that is just a ministerial vote.
Okay. Just pull out that third one. Do you have that right
Yeah.
here? Oh, I have it. I have it. All right, great. Then we'll start at the top here. May I hear a motion that the school committee approves the fiscal year 27 operating budget request of $53,697,409 as presented, and authorizes the superintendent to correspondingly revise the fiscal year 27 budget book as needed for submission to the finance committee as the approved fiscal year 27 school committee budget.
So moved.
Second.
Brad has moved, Sheila has seconded. We're going to do a roll call vote. Angel,
Yes.
Sarah,
Yes.
Sheila,
Yes.
Brad.
Yes.
I'm a yes, 5-0. The motion passes. Moving on to the second motion, may I hear a motion that the school committee approves the request to the town for a transfer of $300,000 to the Special Education Stabilization Fund in accordance with the process outlined in DIBA, Town of Bedford Reserve Policy Special Education Reserve Fund, to be made via warrant article at the annual town meeting,
Oops, and
in March 2026.
So moved.
Second.
Sheila's moved, Angel has seconded, roll call vote. Angel,
Yes.
Sarah,
Yes.
Sheila,
Yes.
Brad.
Yes.
I'm a yes, 5-0. The motion passes. And then moving on to the third motion, may I hear a motion that the school committee approves the establishment of revolving funds for parking fees and activity fees as presented?
So moved.
Second.
Brad has moved, Sheila seconded, roll call vote. Angel,
Yes.
Sarah,
Yes.
Sheila,
Yes.
Brad.
Yes.
I'm a yes, 5-0. The motion has passed. Thank you.
thank you all very much.
All right. Moving, did you want to say something?
I'm just
Cole?
gonna text Aaron to say, I'll
It is now the school committee's budget,
change it.
not the superintendent's
That's
budget.
ours. All right, moving on along to the second half of our meeting, we're going to reopen for public comment. At this point, everything I read before still applies. You'll have 3 minutes, if you don't mind giving your name, address, and you'll have 3 minutes to speak on anything that you have. So anyone in the room wishing to provide public comment for this half of our meeting? No? Seeing none, is there anyone online? Please raise your virtual hand if you wish to provide public comment. Just give it a few more seconds in case anyone wishes to. You just scroll down quick, make sure we're not. Nope. Okay, seeing none, the public comment period has closed. Moving along to our consent agenda and vote, Superintendent Schwang.
Just minutes and some field trip out-of-state requests overnight that require your approval.
All items on the consent agenda are considered to be routine and will be enacted by one motion. There will be no separate discussion of these items unless a member of the committee so requests, in which event the item will be considered in its normal sequence on the agenda. Would anyone like to pull either the minutes or the field trip requests off the consent agenda?
I just want to make a quick comment about the field trip requests. Is just again a thanks to those that they very clearly state their scholarship and or fundraising opportunities for students and families to make sure that they can participate. It's always a good thing to hear. So that's all.
Sarah?
No, I'm glad that Nature's Classroom, or now it's, what's it called?
Outdoor
Classroom has, is continuing. I think it's a great program.
Sheila?
No questions.
Brad?
No questions.
No questions as well. Then may I hear a motion that the school committee approve the consent agenda as presented, including the minutes of January 13th, 2026, and the field trip requests, the out-of-state Courier Museum, Manchester, New Hampshire, April 2nd, 2026, and the overnight out-of-state Nature's Classroom, Freedom, New Hampshire, October 21st through 23rd, 2026.
So moved.
Second.
Angel's moved, Sarah has seconded. Roll call vote, Angel,
Yes.
Sarah,
Yes.
Sheila,
Yes.
Brad.
Yes.
I'm a yes, 5-0. The motion passes. All right. Moving on to our next agenda item, the fiscal year 26 quarter 2 fiscal report, Superintendent Schwang and Julie Kern.
Yeah, I'll ask Julie to, I don't know where you want her to sit, wherever you want. Maybe there is easier.
Okay.
Just a high-level overview. This is part of this meeting as our quarter two finance focus meeting. You may recall, as part of our commitment and strategic plan, we are setting aside one meeting per quarter to focus only on finance. So we are ensuring that we're all doing our due diligence in terms of our fiscal position. Julie has presented in the standard format the details about where we stand in quarter two. I think the bottom line is that we have lost a little ground in terms of the deficit position. We were at about $77,000 in deficit at the end of quarter one. It has increased to $216,289 as of January 9th. And Julie will go into the detail about why that is. And what additional fiscal controls we're going to put in place. We are going to continue some essentials only spending protocols. However, we are going to relax them for the academic, teaching, learning, and student services departments to ensure that it doesn't impact student need. But the larger accounts within administrative control, we're going to watch very closely. And we are continuing a practice, which I think we'll probably never not do, which is every single backfill or open position needs my personal approval, but I actually meet with the whole central office team to ensure that we absolutely must fill it, and to ensure that we're following our guidelines in order to hit our budget targets. So that control, you'll see, has proven to allow us to pick up some savings on our salary lines in order to offset the controllable lines that are out of our discretion. So, Julie?
Hi, everybody. Okay, so we have prepared the quarter two fiscal analysis and report. We have September, October, November, and December, 4 months of the academic year and 6 months of the fiscal year under our belts at this point. And unlike the first quarterly report, our biggest swing is a payroll for our instructional staff. We had only had 2 payrolls at that point of that report. So this is a much more informative and useful report to really dig into.
Sorry, Owl just doesn't seem to be doing it.
That wasn't a secret message for me or anything, okay.
Trying to get it to.
Yeah, the owl is not, do I need to do something to the owl?
No, it did that last meeting too, so
Okay.
I apologize to the public.
Okay. So as was reported back in October, we are continuing to manage non-discretionary cost overruns while achieving savings in other accounts. And the projected deficit has grown, but is still manageable and within previously approved parameters, largely due to the Special Ed Stabilization Fund. We are continuing to monitor, and we are we do anticipate managing within and improving the deficit through the next 6 months. That would be the hope. This is a conservative forecast. So basically, some very high-level points here. Our actual and projected salary savings have improved significantly, nearly doubling from the first quarterly report. And we also have a small positive as opposed to negative balance in our special ed transportation account. And that is almost entirely due to a collaborative credit. Now, we do receive collaborative credits, but these are not guaranteed, and they have been diminishing in size. So conservative budgeting would lead me not to count on those, which is was explained by the superintendent earlier. We are not counting on those next year. We did not count on those this year. The collaboratives do take to their boards annually after the conclusion of their audited financials in mid-fallish time, after the close of their fiscal years, what to do with any operating surpluses. And we have regularly had, and I say we because we are members of these collaboratives, they're well managed, and we have in fact had surpluses. There are choices about what to do with those, whether they can be put into capital capital funds or returned back to members as member credits, advantages of memberships. These are also highly regulated by DESE, which is maybe about 5 to 6 years old, to really make sure that these financial matters are handled appropriately. So surpluses are capped at, I believe, 25% of, I can't quote exactly the cap, but it's a designed cap to make sure that they don't become too large, right? So it's controlled, regulated by DESE and by the members. So that is helping us this year. So that's very excellent. The surpluses were recently confirmed in the past board meetings that occurred in the past 6 weeks, both by lab and by case. So those are very positive. The lab member credit is much smaller. It's 15,000 approximately. So, but that also helps. So where we're landing with all of the various ups and downs is around 216,000 in deficit to be covered by the Special Ed Stabilization Fund. Should we not be able to improve that position in the next 6 months? I just also want to point out that we have eligible expenses that exceed that number, the 216 number. So we are covering much of the extraordinarily volatile costs in that category of non-discretionary expenses, including McKinney-Vento deficit that we reported, which is unchanged from the first quarter. We are covering many of those with savings in other accounts. So we are, it has been the intention all along to make sure that the student-facing activities are seamless for the kids. The curriculum that's needed in real time has been procured all year. But we are, those budgets do not have deficit-solving balances in them at this point, and so we are relaxing that control. Our staff still have to go through a requisition to PO approval process, so expenditures are still monitored and approved by my staff and my office, but we are relaxing that control for our art department, our math department, our social studies department, our science department, et cetera. Okay, our counseling department, so it applies to student services, student-facing accounts as well. And we're asking our bigger budgets, our administrative budgets, our principals' budgets, our IT budgets to keep the pressure on, and those are the accounts that do still have actually significant balances as of this report, and those are the places that we can actually make some headway to improve the balances in those accounts. So that's the thinking there. That's where we're at. You have the summary table, which shows our actual spending as opposed to, it's not a forecast, that's where we're at today. It's 48% of our budget spent. And you can see that, and that includes spent and/or encumbered. As you know, we use encumbrances as a tool to control budget with bigger bills that incrementally are paid in 1/10 increments throughout the year or quarterly or whatever the timing is. So that chart is what you're seeing there. What you can see also is the balances as of 1/9 in some of our key revolving accounts. The preschool revolving account has a healthy balance at this point of $163,000. Our athletic revolving account is around $27,000, a little bit over. Our budget is, these balances are shared with you to give confidence that we in fact can afford the budgetary offsets that we've planned on. We have an athletic budgetary offset of $25,000, so there probably will be some more funds coming in, so that will be sufficient there. The lunch account also has maintained a positive balance, as it has for the last couple of years, due to the higher reimbursement levels and the elimination of the fee for lunch. The school rental account continues to not have a huge balance. We will not be, we do not have the full budgeted offset. I wouldn't project that we would have that by the end of the year, so we've reduced that. The amount available to offset is less than the originally budgeted amount. And that's due to the extensive use of our buildings. We are available to the public, but we use our buildings so intensively, either through town departments, recreation, ourselves, community groups, that sometimes we can't accommodate all the rentals that we could, in fact, potentially. Yeah, the buildings are in use.
I will just note that I am scheduled to review with Ron Scaltretto, our facilities director, our actual, I've asked to tighten our policy around fee waivers. We want to be as generous as possible with respect to community groups that contribute to the life and experiences of our student activities and students. But that is an area where we could potentially tighten a bit. It's a matter of trade-offs in terms of most of these community groups are nonprofits and similarly strapped, so we want to support them, but we also have a prioritization in terms of who's eligible for fee waivers. So we're actually going to review that pretty closely to see if we can break even a little bit more in that revolving fund. I don't expect that we'll be able to pick up that much ground because we don't want to disenfranchise a lot of the activities that our students benefit from. But we do feel like we need to be more rigorous in terms of fee waiver policy, or procedure. I actually don't know if it's policy or procedure, but I will let you know if there's a significant change in that area.
Okay. All right, so the next part of the report just lays out by our major expense categories, some highlights and what's been driving the various changes in the last few months. And it does rely upon a full salary forecast, so we capture the savings that we have experienced versus our budget in the salary accounts, and then we forecast for the remaining payrolls of the year what's ahead and how much our expenditures will be. There are the areas that are the hardest to forecast and estimate are substitutes, the usual suspects, the things that happen later in the spring that we don't know about yet. So just a few highlights from our salary savings, and as I already stated, we have increased, we are showing greater savings in salary accounts, $227,000 approximately. And basically, generally, our salary lines are tracking quite close to budget, and you have the detailed report in the end of this memo with small sort of favorable variances that are driven by the part-year vacancies that we have had, and some minor adjustments in costs. And that they're primarily driven by a handful of vacancies that we have had at various times throughout the year and to date, and some attrition resignations, say, in our IT department is one example, that it took a little while to fill that position, those types of things. Because we have had a handful of ed support professionals positions vacant at various times consistently, although we've just actually hired quite a few with the new year, which is great. And we've been covering these vacancies in a lot of different ways internally, but without any use of contracted labor, for example. There is a significant savings in that account of about $90,000. And we do have savings in professional teacher salaries, library salaries, and custodial salaries for various reasons to do with our staffing. And we do have some unfavorable variances that some of our general ed support professional salary lines are a little bit over budget. That's just typically due to hiring if someone comes in a little bit higher than the previous holder of the position, and a little bit on our teacher leadership stipends. Those are paid on steps and scales, and it varies every year. Sometimes they're not all filled, so there's we're a little bit off in that budget by about 11,000. So substitute costs, we did a full analysis of the substitute costs and the anticipated leaves of absences. We do seem to be in a little bit of a reverse pattern that we were in last year. Last year, we accrued a lot of additional leaves. We had a lot of additional leaves towards the end of the year. This year, we had a lot of leaves in the beginning of the year, so a lot of them actually are behind us. And so that was an interesting pattern to observe. The implication of that being we may accrue some additional substitute savings in the next few months, which would be, excuse me, helpful. So let's see. Custodial overtime, Ron came by the other week and said, snow's killing us. Please, please, please plan for some extra overtime for snow removal. So I did. That's embedded in the forecast. Snow is expensive.
Thank you, Mother Nature.
Okay. Ron has been an amazing partner in trying to help us control our costs on the school side while still maintaining and taking care in our buildings, for which are excellent, and we are very proud. Okay, and in the operating department expense realm, we were projecting a greater positive budget surplus in those accounts combined. As of quarter one, has worsened a little bit. And it is, the largest overruns have to do with legal expenses and our special ed contractual services line, which again is non-discretionary, totally driven by IEP services. And we are running a little high this year. Last year, we ran a little low by year end. I don't expect that to happen again this year, so we're accounting for that in this forecast. And these are unanticipated non-recurring expenses rather than structural budget items. Like I said, we were a little bit low last year. We're a little bit high this year. School committee, we also have some school committee reserve expenses that are above budget, again, tied to legal and legal expenses. We are also a little bit to the bad, a moderate over expenditure of about $10,000 in our home health and tutoring services that some of our kids are requiring, say after a hospitalization or other issues that require that. And those, again, typically IEP driven. And we have some favorable balances and accounts that are currently underspent, and we expect them to remain underspent because we're controlling those expenditures, notably including some instructional hardware. Those have to do with our leases, our device leases. We were able to get A grades on our Apple end-of-life lease returns to an extent that we thought would be amazing if we could achieve, and in fact our IT department did achieve that, and I credit some of our cases and our responsible behavior by students and our supervision by our building staff. So we had a sizable return credit for that. We are also holding on some professional development. We have some savings there and some supplies and materials in multiple accounts. We anticipate some good savings from, and those are accounts that we still plan to control really tightly through the end of the year. Transportation, we have been over budget in that account, and we remain over budget. There's a small change, and the over budget aspect of that account is that's where the McKinney-Vento transportation is accounted for. It is considered general and vocational education. We budgeted sufficiently for the vocational and to get out-of-district kids who are approved to attend Minuteman because Shawsheen does not offer the program. Those were to the good slightly on that budget. That's helping the McKinney-Vento deficit. We also had our first half fuel de-escalation credit. It's a de-escalation credit. We were hit with large escalation credits. They've been de-escalation credits last year and this year. We expect another one, which is embedded in the forecast, so that's what's helping that line item. Most of the expenses in that account are contractual. So they are nailed down from day one and encumbered, and we pay incremental bills. It's pretty, that's one of the easier areas to forecast. Okay, and then there has been significant change in volatility, no surprise, in the out-of-district special education tuition accounts. We are overall projected to be over budget by about $427,000. And our sort of gross tuition is in the realm of $6 million. So that's the figure. The operating budget carries about half of that. Circuit breaker pitches in the rest. So these are absolutely right in the definition of the stabilization fund eligibility. They are unanticipated move-ins, outside residency determinations by DESE, and students just placed out of district for the first time that were not yet on the radar when the budget was planned last year. We do maintain placeholders for students who are in the pipeline or known or our staff are working with, though that's not what we're talking about here. We're talking about students who were not known at the time the budget was put together. So in terms of the overage and tuition, most of it is eligible for special ed stabilization support. We will not need that much of it, so because of the other positive surpluses in the other accounts. What else to point out here? Yes.
My point on that, though, is were we not to accrue those offsetting savings in other accounts, you can see that the magnitude of the swing, $427,000, would eat up a large portion of our current special ed stabilization fund, which is why it is important to get that higher to actually do its job. We will continue to work to try to absorb these types of swings, but the nature of the volatility, as I think I've maybe emphasized a lot, are hundreds of thousands of dollars given one decision that may go against us based on a DESE interpretation or a movement of an unexpected student. We are committed and obligated, happy to work with families and serve them in this way. We don't actually have discretion around it, but the size of the volatility dwarfs all of the other, what we do have discretion over, which is why that stabilization fund being maximally funded is important.
And another point to make is that at this point in the year, we do still have some students whose placements are pending. So we have placeholders in this budget, which are our best guesses at what the cost may be for the remainder of the year for those placements not yet finalized. So that's about a $205,000 placeholder, which is subject to change, of course. And that is we're carrying the lab credit, which is helping the account overall for about $15,000. And our numbers are not substantially different. They've crept up by about one student. Those are reported there as well. And then special ed transportation, again, that has been improved by the CASE membership credit, and which is terrific. And our ridership is pretty stable. The most significant part of that is staying within our 6 in-district vans, which we had to creep up over the past several years from 4 to 5 to 6, and we've been stable at 6 last year and this year. Our ridership has changed by about 1 student, both in district and out of district. So that's pretty stable, which is positive. And we do have a small placeholder there for some of the placeholder out-of-district tuition payments, placements that have not occurred, the 3 that are still in process as of this minute. So you have your detailed line item report, which is in the same format as the budget itself. And then that shows a potential transfer from the stabilization fund in the amount of $216,000 and $289. And then we show the balances of the Special Ed Stabilization Fund and major grants. We report those at the tail end of that report and in our grants, and we do plan to spend down our special funds, circuit breakers. So we also show after the transfer, the current balance of the stabilization fund at 433, and all the various year-end forecasts for those accounts as well. So I am happy to take any questions.
Thank you. All right, Kim, if you're still there, we'll start with you.
I'm still here. I don't have any questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Angel.
I have a few questions. So just as a matter of, is 48% about where you would expect to be at this point, at this time of year? Like
Yep.
just half the year,
Yeah, it's
half,
pretty-
50% essentially of budget, or is that?
Salaries aren't encumbered and salaries lag. So between encumbering all expenses and salaries still ahead, that's what I expect. That's a pretty common, that's not unusual.
Got it. You mentioned, sorry, I'm kind of jumped all over the place.
That's
'cause
all right.
My computer's not cooperating and let me take my notes the way I would have, so I'm handwriting my chicken scratch and I have to figure it out. So you just said something about the placeholder you have, the 205,000, that can potentially move in either direction, right? Like that placeholder could potentially not be enough, so that number would increase. It also could be high and go down. So
That's right.
And we won't know that until those placements happen, essentially.
That's correct.
Do we know how many students that accounts for?
3.
3? Okay.
Although we may have gotten another one that we.
That's right.
Put, like yesterday.
Yep.
So,
Okay. Well,
At the time of this report, it
so
was
it's that
3.
next quarter, and I guess we'll.
yes. Yeah, I can't emphasize, like, it's volatile.
Tell me bad news now.
Volatile. Yeah.
Okay. This is kind of more of a general question, which is, has there been any further discussion or movement on this idea that we've, learned that they do, like they do in Burlington, right? That they absorb some of those costs. Like, has there been any further discussion about that? Like for the town essentially be taking that over so that they understand it differently?
I did have some additional conversations with finance committee members this week in preparation for the presentation on Thursday, and that is a topic that may have come up. As you know, the town is going through another finance director transition. When the new finance director arrives, it's something I anticipate taking up with Matt Hamilton. As Julie has advised, it's an unusual structure, and it cuts both ways. But it is still the idea that I believe is something that is worth exploring, or at least understanding. The stabilization fund is one way to manage it. This is a different, the Burlington model, if we want to call it that, is a different way to manage it, where the town just absorbs the ups and downs within the fixed cost sort of accounts, and then the school is expected to manage the rest. The concern, that kind of come up is, does that disincentivize the schools from trying to minimize the cost out of district placements? And what Burlington has done is that they have included the in-district substantially separate programs in that account to ensure that there isn't a disincentive to outplace students, because it then goes on the town side and not on the school side. And as with anything in a town the sizes of Burlington and Bedford, it has to be a trusted partnership, and Burlington, as I understand, has developed this over the course of 40 years, so there's a lot of trust around the fact that everyone is doing their best efforts. It's not unlike, it's not as if Marion's staff we don't apply for the maximum Medicaid reimbursement because we don't get the money, right? We do our part for that. We do our part for the McKinney-Vento reimbursement, even though the town gets the money. And similarly, the town, gets this, the Chapter 70, and it's embedded sort of in the the revenue that's passed over to us. So I think it could work either way, but I do want to continue to elevate the idea that, similar to Ron not being probably held accountable for overtime on snow shoveling this past week, or DPW from probably overrunning potentially their budget for snow removal. Snow in the school side happens in the form of non-discretionary costs for mandated student services, and town needs to understand that we simply don't have the ability to control that a student moved in yesterday, happens to be on IEP, we must pay for the services. That wasn't mismanagement on anyone's part. We need to have a tool, either understanding on the fixed expense side of the ledger, or a stabilization fund type structure to allow us to absorb those costs.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So our deficit at 216,000, if I understand this correctly, 88,000 of that deficit is legal expenses that we've had to incur this year, correct?
Yes,
Ish,
plus about,
88,000-ish that we've had to deal with, okay. All right, I'm gonna end on that, thank you.
Thank you. Sarah?
Thank you very much for this thorough report. I don't have any particular questions.
Sheila?
I do not have any additional questions either.
Brad?
Sorry, I thought I'd have a chance to.
Sorry.
You tricked me there, Sheila.
I don't know, I'm focused on
That's all right.
Liz and I, who are both
Yeah, that-
freezing in this
that's great.
room, and I'm like hoping the heat comes on.
I got three real quick ones, I think. I always get a little of a bit of a red flag when I see that we're not spending all of our professional development money. It says here we're 30,000 under budget, so can you say something to comfort me about that? Are people getting the professional development that they need and want, or?
I am confident the answer to that is yes.
Okay.
I will just say, we have our two assistant superintendents here. I have asked Marianne and Kelly to develop a more equitable and transparent process around how professional development funds are accessed. What we have been controlling expenditures on are what I would call one-offs. Somebody wants to go to this conference that that may be aligned to someone's their own professional sort of desires, but not aligned to our district strategic plan. So that particular account is reserved to prioritize strategic plan initiatives, but we have been intentionally miserly given our current situation. But I would say that by and large, even with those controls, we haven't said no to a lot of things. What we may have said is like, maybe only 2 people can go instead of 4 this year, right? Maybe every other year, that type of thing. But we are not short shrifting on the strategic plan aligned initiatives related to middle school math and literacy and our restorative wellness efforts, or our anti-hate work. And I think some of this is also offset by our success in securing some additional state funding for the a third year of hate crimes prevention grant, which is offsetting some of the professional
Correct.
development for the anti-hate. Marianne just secured, I can announce this one, $50,000 on additional professional development for restraint and seclusion practices. Not do it. And we have another grant that we can't announce yet today, but we believe will also help to keep the pressure off of this. I will hopefully be able to announce that next week. That is aligned to another one of our strategic objectives. So we're trying to leverage competitive grant funds to sort of keep the pressure on the operating budget.
Can you explain the de-escalation fuel credit part? I'm not sure I fully understand how well that works.
Sure, when we go out to bid, the contract pricing comes back based on the prevailing price of fuel at the time of the bid, and there's a protection in the contract that goes both ways. If fuel goes up, we pay the bus company, and there's a formula that's part of contract documents. It's very common, done all the time, and then vice versa. So there's a protection for us if the fuel goes down, and they base their estimate at the time on higher fuel prices to operate the fleet, which is,
Okay.
a big line item in their budget. So that's how that works, and there's a calculation, and we get backup, and we get an invoice credit.
Everybody kind of agrees to,
Well, it's contractual,
Yeah, that's what
and
it-
it's from built
it's
into
like
the
hedging that.
bid.
Okay, so what happened here was we're getting less credit than we expected to get, or we're paying more?
No.
What-
So
Was
it's-
this net bad or net good?
this is
was
good.
net- This was net good?
This is good, a little bit good. It's
Okay.
about, we got a credit
that's
of
what I
just
thought.
under
Okay.
6,000 for the first.
So then I'm not quite sure I understand overall, why is the transportation budget higher than budget? Why are we over budget on transportation?
McKinney-Vento.
Okay, that's That's what I want to see. Okay, great. And this bullet point that says the town received 67,000 in DESI transportation reimbursement is an example of what we were talking about before, money that goes to the town that's not coming to our budget, right?
Correct.
Okay, very good.
And, yep, the
Okay,
claim has been
those were my only questions. Thank you very much. Great work.
Great, thank you, Julie. No further questions. One comment, just a particular thanks for, as you were describing exactly how some of these expenses would fit into the stabilization fund, their eligibility. I think that was really useful because a question we've discussed many times over the past couple of years is what is eligible for that fund? And I think you did a really artful, thoughtful way of describing that tonight. So
Oh, thank you.
I have no further questions.
Great, there's no vote required, it's just an update. I do have a hard copy if you want it of a memo that I pre-prepared for the Finance Committee that I will be transmitting. Maybe it's already been transmitted by Aaron. It's also in your folder, but it just outlines, this is going back to the budget, the discussion around the various sources of possible revenues that might limit our need to access stabilization for next year. So if you would like to copy, pass that along. And I think the only thing left on the agenda tonight is my superintendent's report. I have a few things to update you on. There might be.
Oh, hold on a second. This is what's provided to FinCom. That clip was
That's a
transmitted.
Yeah, but is there, I think we're a shorter copy.
Yeah,
Oh, okay.
here's one more.
Okay.
It's in the electronic folder too. So first of all, I just want to say a public thank you to the Department of Public Works and Facilities. They have all been working around the clock in order to clear schools. From what I can tell in terms of, you can imagine my phone text threads over the last few days. And our DPW stands in good stead with respect to how quickly and how thoroughly they do clear our roads to get school open. I will say that there's always some level of debate. I get some level of feedback about the decision. But I want to remind the community that it is not just the conditions of the roads. We have to take into account the conditions of the sidewalks, as well as what other districts are doing in terms of staffing levels that are safe. But our attendance was actually remarkably good at most of our schools today. I do want to remind the community that DPW cannot go straight out and sidewalks. They're beginning the sidewalk removal in the town sidewalks starting at 4 a.m. In about 6 hours. And they don't expect to be finished with that until Friday, even though they're going to continue to work overtime shifts. And a reminder that town residents are responsible for residential sidewalks. So just keep that in mind, parents, in terms of, whatever you need to do. We have our free busing, or some parents are choosing to drive their kids to school or to be careful in terms of walking. I was up at 1:45 a.m. consulting with DPW to ensure that opening today on a 2-hour delay was okay. Unfortunately, we anticipate another potential storm that will be plowable and require potential nimbleness on Sunday into Monday, though it's farther off, it could blow to the south. So it's important that we continue to stay alert, and I ask everyone's flexibility and patience as these decisions are made. I anticipate at the next meeting updating the committee on the Healthy School Hours Working Group work. We have another meeting scheduled for next week. As some of you may be hearing, the survey has generated a lot of conversation. One thing I'm learning, and I'm still trying to figure out, that people don't like taking surveys, but surveys seem to be the only thing that get people to really pay attention to things that have already been decided or discussed at length. But it is what it is. One thing I learned in some of my past work is communication only is successful if it is transmitted successfully, and it doesn't matter what you said or when you said it or how you said it. If it wasn't heard, you got to think about new ways to communicate. So hence the videos, which are a new tool in our arsenal that I'm learning about. But I do anticipate some robust discussion around this issue. I will report back on the results of that survey, which is not straightforward. I think a lot of feelings on multiple fronts. So after I convene the working group again next week, I anticipate we'll be prepared to bring back an update and ask for your direction in terms of next steps. In a corresponding, I don't know if it's coincidental, but we have recently also got a lot of questions related to tech access and limiting tech access. If you recall, during the early portion of the discussion around the sleep start time, healthy school hours initiative, there was concern that without control of access to tech, you won't get the bang for your buck in terms of sleep if kids are still on their devices. We can't obviously control what families do with their children at home. However, we do have some level of control over access to devices at school and the access to school-issued devices at home. So we are beginning a very in-depth conversation at the leadership team level. I anticipate that this will develop into a third-year strategic plan wellness initiative that will correspond and complement the Healthy School Hours initiative, because that strategic initiative was always about wellness and well-being in general. There are strong feelings in multiple directions on that issue as well. There may be a survey coming to you on that issue as well. But I just want to elevate that because we have been getting a lot of feedback from some parent groups and students. There was a patch that we implemented on our filtering software this week that locked down a number of sites, and I think it caused some students some agita because they couldn't get to the places that used to go. They weren't supposed to be going to those places in some cases. There were some places that were blocked off accidentally, but we're working through the kinks. I just want the community to understand that we are looking at wellness holistically, and I do know that there is a lot of interest in technology, and this is not just cell phones. This is also Chromebooks and iPads and access to the internet and websites and social media. Related, I anticipate at the following meeting we will give you an update on the anti-hate task force work. Kelly and I had a good meeting with co-chairs Todd Ressler and Karen about the work in the coming months. I anticipate bringing representatives from the JGMS Playbook Initiative, being led by two high school students, Matt Karen and Abriana. I forget Abriana's last name. I had the pleasure of going to the launch with the 24, 25 7th and 8th grade ambassadors, and I'm very impressed with the student leadership, both from the high school and the middle school. Very much looking forward to hearing what they're coming up with, because the initiative is all about student-led, a playbook to deal with hate incidents that occur amongst their peers. So I anticipate bringing them to the committee to share either in March or maybe after they've done another one of their workshops in April. So stay tuned. Second to last, Desi was here on site. I think a couple of you met with them. It was a lot of work to prepare for the visit. A lot of credit to our two assistant superintendents. But honestly, I didn't really notice, a lot of people didn't really notice they were here, and we have already gotten some pretty useful feedback from the process, and I think we have tomorrow, preliminary debriefing, and we will share the findings obviously as they are formalized, but we anticipate that this feedback will actually be helpful to help push our strategic initiatives forward, validating in some ways in terms of things that we're already working on, and certainly a few things that maybe we weren't aware of that we will work on. Last, I want to elevate, thank our crossing guards. Our crossing guard Art left last spring, and our other longtime crossing guard Lori is finishing this week. That does leave a vacancy. So we had done extensive efforts throughout the fall to try to elevate this position, but we were unsuccessful. We are working closely with the police department to ensure that there is no gap in supervision and coverage, although I heard that maybe this morning they weren't there today. So I want to thank the crossing guards for this very important work, but also make a plea to the community in terms of anyone who wants a lovely part-time job, fresh air, getting to greet and help children, wonderful children, cross the street safely. It is a really important role, and we really would love to have some consistency with respect to ensuring that that is covered. But either way, the police department and the school department are working together to make sure that continues to be a high priority. But be on the lookout for that opportunity. We are increasing the pay rate, we're looking at creative combinations of maybe existing school staff or police staff to cover some of the shifts, so it doesn't have to be one person for all morning and all afternoon, or one person for all 3 schools. But I just want to elevate that again, because as the community has experienced continued concern around pedestrian safety, and especially right now where you can have to look around the big snowbanks, it is important that we have adult assistance and supervision to help our students get to and from school safely. So just making another plea. And with that, I'm done.
Great, thank you, Cliff. We'll go around if anyone has any questions or any last thoughts. Kim?
Yeah, no questions. Thank you.
Thanks, Kim. Angel?
I had the distinct pleasure of attending the MLK breakfast, which was lovely. Mr. Bressler and Akil did a fabulous job moderating it. There was a absolutely wonderful and lovely tribute to Mike Rosenberg as a component of it. And this was the first time I had the opportunity to go, which was great. And I've been glad that they resuscitated it, because I think we didn't have it last year or maybe the last 2 years. So anyway, and there was people from the community across different organizations and Middlesex and police. I mean, it was great. It was a really, really, really well done event. So I urge folks, if you have the opportunity to go in the future, please do. I just want to reiterate about the surveys. Like, you can be tired about the surveys. I'd like to just remind the community that we do not make decisions based off of social media discussion, right? If you don't make your voice heard to the district and to the committee, we can't possibly use any of that information, right? And so while it may be feeling cumbersome when a survey comes out and then another one comes out, it is truly the best way to get in touch with us. If you don't want to fill out the survey, fill in information and send it to us, right? To the superintendent, to the assistant superintendents, to the school committee, right? You have vehicles to communicate with us that are not social media, right? So that we can take into consideration some of those thoughts and whatnot. So that's it. That's what I got.
Thank you. Sarah?
I want to start with a DPW, thank you. I drove through Bedford, Billerica, Concord, and Carlisle today, and Bedford was by far the best. Yes.
I have heard that.
Yeah, it was remarkable that it was, I think they've been an amazing partnership and ability to open the schools and not miss a full day. I put social media here too for the start time in particular. We don't pay attention to social media. It's not effective. Write an email to us, fill out the survey. I was also surprised by the questions I got about it, and sort of in reflecting on my time on the school committee the last couple of weeks, I just encourage people to either pay attention, or everybody's busy. People don't have to pay attention, but don't complain if you're not paying attention. So, and go back, there's all these, the Citizen has been great on reporting on all of these different start times, on the anti-hate task force, all of the different initiatives that we're doing. So please go back.
I would just say that I do think the videos are helpful for people to really get the big picture quickly. And so in the future, I'm thinking about video ahead of like not, this was simultaneous.
Yeah.
But to use the video to start the conversation before, gathering the data. So again, we're still learning this new tool, but I was going to try to get that video out, the one for the public budget hearing earlier. I am anticipating pushing out probably that same video, because you didn't change anything, ahead of town meeting, right? And push it out probably this week, next week, and then again in the lead up, so that people who may not have the time to sit through a 2-hour school committee meeting can watch a 4-minute video and feel like they have the big picture. So I think the video for the Healthy School Hours, like people's light bulbs went off because it was all in one little 4-minute video. So I'm gonna again think about how we can leverage this additional technology to try to get the word out sooner. But I appreciate your encouragement to pay attention, or to let the people who are paying attention trust that they're giving the feedback.
Yeah.
So.
And I like this iPad Chromebook shut off time. I like that's intriguing, and I think I could see how it would be pushed back. But I think I'm interested to see sort of where that goes and because I think that's, in the whole start time, sleep.
Yeah.
I think it restrains homework.
Yeah.
I mean, you have to do your homework before whatever, 11 o'clock or whatever we put the time on. And I'm sure people will push back on that dramatically, but I think it's an interesting idea to explore.
We have more technological capabilities than I had realized if we want to deploy it. And we also are able, and we may be announcing this soon, to give parents the choice to do it, even if we don't do it so we could do district-wide policy that shuts it off at midnight or whatever but I think lower hanging fruit is if a parent wants to do that, they can do that, and they can control it with an app, or I don't know exactly, we're learning about it. So, but it is a hot topic, and it pairs very closely with the start time discussion, because if you don't address that issue, then you might lose on any ground that you gain.
Yep, I agree. Thank you. That's all.
Thanks, Sarah. Sheila?
Sure. So a couple of things, like on the survey, I would encourage, and I know Liz is in the room, so anything you can do to remind teachers to fill out that survey. Their voice is really important. There's an anonymous capability. You only have to put your email if you want. So that truly is, people should be very honest on that. I know, and Cliff, I was going to ask you this earlier, we just ran out of time. I know at the high school, the plan was for the students to watch the video in advisory and fill it out. Given they lost a school day yesterday, today was a truncated day, I'd like to ask for a little bit of an extension on that, making sure all those kids have the opportunity in advisory to see it. Their voice, there is a lot of talk about this at the high school, and I feel very strongly that the students should all have the opportunity to weigh in on that.
I emailed actually during this meeting to ask for confirmation about when the survey administration is scheduled for JGMS, the high school, and Lane, and if it requires additional days. I had asked for it to be done by Friday, but if the schedule doesn't work out, then
Just making sure then, the BHS teachers and advisors know that, and that there's ample opportunity to collect all of that feedback.
Yep.
So, thanks on that. And then also, just a plug for our high school high honors history students, we have our history fair this Thursday evening from 6:30 to 8:30. We have, I believe the count is 100 students, which is half of the junior class. They start working on this project in September, and it is a cumulative effort with lots of iterations and research and first and secondary sourcing and partnering. And it's pretty fantastic. The high school is filled with these projects, and they're moving into the library. It should be a great night. So please come support our high school students. From these entries, some then get selected to go on to the next level, to state competition and beyond. So it's a great evening on Thursday night before the next snowstorm comes. So come support our history students.
Thank you, Brad.
No questions, thank you.
Yeah, no, I have no questions. Thank you, Cliff, for the update. I agree with everyone said. Our streets were done quickly and well. So thank you to everyone involved in that effort. Nothing else on my end. So, Cliff, did you have anything else to add before we close the meeting? Okay. then, if there is no further business under the open session agenda, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn the public meeting.
So moved.
Second.
Brad has moved, Sheila has seconded. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you
So
for indulging me.
So strange.